Hello and welcome to another episode of Cavell Cloud Conversations with me, Finbarr Begley. As always, Patrick runs away and leaves me to do the interviews by myself. But today I am joined by someone better than Patrick, which is Oliver Lively, who is head of sales for the UK, Benelux and Nordics at Luware. How are we doing, Ollie?
Yeah, very good. We're recording this on a Friday. So yeah, looking forward to the weekend, looking forward to the CX Summit next week as well.
I mean, it's set to be a pretty nice weekend in the UK as well. We've kind of had a little bit of a break in the winter gloom, as they'd say, and the temperatures in the teens, and it's a bit crazy, actually.
Yeah, I think it always seems to happen like this. We have a little bit of sunshine, everyone thinks it's spring, and then I'm sure it will get awful again before we get into spring. So
yeah, we actually have view. No, but we have a term for that in the UK. It's called Fool's Spring. Where it crops up a little bit of heat before the actual temperature drops right back down again. But people are not here to talk about the weather. We are here to talk about, obviously, a bit about Luware. Do you want to give a bit of sort of an introduction to the company, just so people have a bit of a grasp on who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So Luware, we've been around now for about 15 years, just coming up to our 15-year anniversary. So we've always kind of specialized in developing solutions for the Microsoft communication stack. So that started with a customer service solution for OCS, Link, then Skype for Business, and now obviously Teams. So we've always had that quite specialist, narrow development focused of building contact centers and other customer service solutions for the Microsoft stack.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, for the context, people, is that Microsoft likes to build a certain amount of a solution, and then there's loads of like areas where they're just like, nah, not going to do that, not going to do that, and then there's a whole, load of companies and people like Luware who come in and actually make the product usable for the end customer.
We try.
So we were talking earlier about sort of, what's been happening in the space. And one of the things you said was that you felt like a lot of the discussion about Teams had started to sort of die down a little bit. So you wanted to, is there an idea that people have stopped talking about Teams now? And does that mean that Teams is less prevalent than it has been in the past? Or what's going on that front?
Yeah, I think there's always in the CCaaS market a bit of disparity between what the customers are asking for and what the industry or vendors are kind of telling customers that they need. So certainly from a customer side, we're seeing it more than ever, right? Customers asking for their contact centers to be integrated into Teams. I think from a industry perspective, we've obviously seen this massive shift towards AI, which we'll talk about later. And I just find it quite interesting when, and this has happened with various other solutions, like, for example, video, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, when a solution actually is mature enough to use in the mass market for customers, it seems like the CCaaS industry kind of gets a bit bored of that and then moves on to the shiny new toy. So yeah, I just find it interesting, the disparity between what customers seem to be actually asking for, the technologies that are actually mature enough to meet those needs, and then the industry pumping out new technologies or things that maybe customers aren't quite ready for.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely like to talk about things like, for example, agentic a couple of years before they're even ready. So I guess just to dive into a little bit more about the topic, I mean, you say Teams is growing, but I mean, to give a bit of context, where is Teams actually being integrated into these contact centers? Like, what role is it taking? How are people using it? And I guess, why is it so important to them that they get their Teams integrated?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because lots of people, when they think of a contact center, they think of that kind of chicken farm contact center, which is 300 people in a room, either hammering outbound calls or getting hammered with inbound calls, kind of handcuffed to their desk, that kind of image. Where we've seen it, and certainly the customers that would like to use Teams as the endpoint for their contact center, is away from that traditional kind of image. It's more towards the knowledge workers, right? So I think if you think about why you might want to use Teams in a contact center, it's because you want to be connected to the rest of the business, but also connected to other platforms like SharePoint and knowledge that's held within Teams, and have that as your single app. So if that's a requirement, then you probably tend to be more in that knowledge worker role rather than just handling the same interaction as time and time again. So those are really the customers that are asking for Teams as their contact center endpoint. It's not generally their primary role to be handling calls, handling tasks, but those tasks that they do handle, it makes sense to invest in that technology because things like the integrations that we can provide and the reporting insights we can provide, there's a high enough return on investment there, even if they aren't taking the same amount of calls. So I think that's the kind of shift we've seen more towards those knowledge workers, and that really opens up some interesting use cases. So we are typically strongest in finance. Obviously, there's a bit of a tie with our headquarters there, Switzerland, but the guys like insurance providers typically that it's been really popular with our solution. And again, these guys aren't handling like thousands of calls a month per person. But they're the ones that they do handle, they're high value, they can add a lot of value to the customer conversation.
Yeah, so we're talking about someone like me sitting at a desk, and I need to answer a call to a customer, and my company needs that call recorded, they need it monitored, they need it compliance tracked, but I'm not constantly logged into a software looking for the next contact center call to come in, and then someone pings me on Teams and says, cool, you're taking this one, or something, and then it just comes through, you know?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think if we break down at the core of what a contact center should be doing, it should be routing the right interaction to the right person that can handle that as quickly, efficiently, and with as much value as possible. So the value is really in that routing, right? Making sure we're getting that interaction to the right person, rather than probably moving away from just getting somebody to handle as many interactions as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, bring this back to what you said earlier about people being distracted by AI while Teams is sort of just maturing in the background. I mean, what has that maturity looked like in the past year or two? So where has the solution gotten to now that it maybe wasn't a few years ago when people were last hyped about it?
Yeah, I think if we look at the PSTN side of things, in COVID, when a lot of organizations were forced to move away from their legacy platforms, it was a little bit of a panic, right? Just get anything connected to make maybe Teams work, or maybe another cloud provider work as a remote phone system, essentially. I think we're now in that second wave where organizations have really thought through how they're connecting Teams from a PSTN perspective, with technologies like Operator Connect now becoming really mature, some really good DRaaS solutions out there on the market. So certainly the mid kind of end and enterprise organizations now have moved to a mature Teams telephony platform, whether that's Operator Connect or DRaaS. And now that puts them, that is a kind of a prerequisite, right, to putting your contact center on Teams. And now that puts them in a solid position where they can now consider putting their contact center on Teams. So I think it's really been, obviously Teams has matured massively from a feature perspective, but also the PSTN side of it has matured massively. And I think that means that more and more organizations are using Teams as their phone system globally, and that just makes our addressable market bigger, essentially.
Yeah, because you have to have some way of making those calls connect into Teams, and the company has to have probably already started to think about it before they start thinking, well, actually, can I integrate these together as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's also talk about AI, because I know obviously you're doing stuff with AI as well, and part of that might even be integrating that into Teams too. So I guess because it is still the hype and growing topic. So what is Luware doing on the AI front? I mean, how are you approaching it? So
it's obviously something that, as I mentioned earlier, it's been a massive focus for the CCaaS industry. I think when ChatGPT kind of first burst onto the scene, there were a lot of vendors out there kind of a week later saying, oh, now our chatbots are all ChatGPT, and kind of going straight into it. We took a slightly different approach. We wanted to take a slight step back and really look at the technology stacks that were available and look a bit further into the future rather than just focusing on getting an AI solution to market as quickly as possible. So we've kind of landed on two approaches. The first approach is going to be a Microsoft first AI approach. And that probably doesn't come as a surprise as everything we do is kind of Microsoft first. So that's harnessing tools like Copilot Studio, which is a really nice kind of out of the box, fairly cost-effective AI tool, and then also utilizing other more advanced capabilities like Azure AI Studio, and in the future tools like Microsoft Foundry, which has now I think over 1,500 LLMs in it. So that will be the first kind of approach for us, and we've already had some solutions released on that, and then we'll continue to go down that road. So that Microsoft first message, we will absolutely bring that to our AI approach. And the second kind of approach that we were discussing before this call, Finbarr, is a kind of bring your own AI model, right? So I think this really fits into those larger kind of larger enterprises where they're probably, from what the guys that we've spoken to, they're already developing things in-house. They're already training their own models. And then we want to allow those customers to bring those models and bring those AI solutions into the contact center.
I think that's an interesting point to just focus on a second, because I think the perception of a lot of the industry right now is that there is still a large skills gap in terms of what enterprises are ready to do and build on their own front in terms of AI. But you're saying, so you're happy with the bring your own AI approach because all of these companies are building it. So, I mean, do you feel like these customers are ready for AI and they're ready to build their own, or how much do you have to help them on that journey?
Yeah, I think it depends on company to company to give the kind of non-committal politician's answer. But I think
That's fine.
It probably depends a little bit on the market segment as well. I think in the SME kind of sub 1,000, sub 2,000, I think the out of the box tools like Copilot Studio are really attractive because they're fairly quick to get off the ground. They're easy to build. So it's really important for us to that's why we're going with that Microsoft kind of first approach. So you can bring your Copilot Studio bots natively into our workflows. So that's the approach there. So if you want something that's kind of more out of the box, you can go into Copilot Studio, add your knowledge bases from websites or SharePoint lists, add your triggers in, and then that should be quite nice and easy. On the other side of things, probably more on the enterprise, and again, some enterprises we've spoken to haven't even started, right? So some of them, that out-of-the-box approach will work for them. Others, they've had large amounts of budget, I suppose, from executive level to say, okay, we're doing this, we need to build something. And some of them are a bit further along that journey, and some of them have started building. And I think it's for those. And specifically, some of our existing customers have told us they're doing this. So we want to offer the compatibility between their contact center solution and those bots, and not just force them down a route to say you have to use Copilot Studio, which probably won't be ready for them or good enough for them.
And I guess the burning question on everyone's minds at the moment is, what are people actually using these for? Right, because I mean, we talk AI, bots, but like, can you give us just some examples of what your customers are actually using AI and bots for at the moment? Like, do you have any interesting examples, or just, what's the most common thing that they're doing with this technology?
Yeah, I think there's a few different areas. There's the automation, which is probably that bot side of things. So trying to automate and have a bot handle regular repetitive tasks. Okay, that's probably the first thing that everyone thinks of when they come to AI. I think the more interesting area, especially for a contact center, is actually in the augmentation and analytics side of things. So those are broadly the three areas that we're focusing on. I think the augmentation side, providing things like relevant knowledge base articles at a certain point in a conversation. I think those are probably where we can add the value. If we go back to which agents we said were using a Teams contact center, they're there on the high value interactions. So if we can provide them with relevant articles, relevant knowledge as they're handling those interactions, then that's just going to add the value there. So that's probably already starting with things like Copilot 365, right? That's what that is trying to solve, is make those everyday work tasks easier. I would say in the contact center, probably not seeing that a lot in production at the moment, because it requires such a lot of effort from a data readiness perspective to make sure that data is in a state that AI can use it. And I think customers are starting that data readiness process at the moment and not actually seeing that in production yet.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's an interesting point, where the marketing on AI is here. A lot of customers are still finding that they have a lot of work to get their data to a point where they can do more interesting things. And I think it's one thing to tell people who are listening, who are like, oh, everyone's talking about AI and I'm not on my AI journey yet, is that you're not alone on that front. Like, a lot of people are looking at AI and looking at what it requires, and then looking at their, OneDrive and kind of looking at all the different folders, and every siloed part of the company has a different one, and they're like, well, how do I get, and where did the documents go, and a lot of those kind of very practical questions, to be honest.
It's probably something, as we said earlier, there's the market. If you look to marketing or watch some of the videos or the demos, you'd think, okay, this is all ready. Loads of customers are using this. But I think the reality is that customers are still in that first stage, which is that data kind of preparation. The other side of it is, right, even if you've got all your data in a state that AI can use it, all of your company's data is there, and you're letting AI into that. The amount of kind of security and data privacy and GDPR processes that you need to go through to get that before a CISO would actually sign off on that is huge. I mean, we see huge hundreds of question security documents on a contact center without AI, right? Around where the data's stored, how that's managed. So what that looks like with AI, that's just a big kind of security risk, I suppose. So yeah, CISOs are going to be cautious before ticking the box there.
Yeah, but that of course then reinforces this idea of bring your own AI that you're talking about, because if someone is in a position where they're building their own, they have it with very tight controls, it's being developed internally, so they know everything that it does, then it's a much better proposition for you, because you can bring that AI to enhance their system, but you're not actually taking on or guaranteeing that risk assessment process because they're doing it themselves.
100%. And if they built their own model, right, then they've obviously gone through their own data security processes. But by the same token, on the Microsoft side, if they're already using Copilot 365 for their users, and maybe they've already made that investment, obviously not everyone has, but a lot of organizations have started to make that investment, then it's not a huge stretch to then actually use that in Copilot Studio. Obviously, there's probably some additional security things to go through, but it's not a new AI solution. So by using the Microsoft AI stack, we hope to make that kind of security process less painful, because you're not starting again, and a lot of organizations have already started going through that process to ratify Microsoft AI, so we can leverage that as well. So yeah, I think that's a massive kind of win, I suppose, is if you don't have to start that all again for your contact center if you've already done it.
And a lot of trust in the Microsoft brand as well, to build these solutions that are going to help you rather than cause problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we're always very transparent around the underlying technology. We don't try and white label anything or claim that it's Luware AI, because actually the kind of customers that are using the solution, they're going to see through that pretty quickly anyway. But then if they know it's Microsoft, then they can do their own research. They can go through our own security processes. And from a kind of selfish perspective, we can step out a little bit there. Okay, it's not us. You're kind of taking a deep dive examination into it. It's Microsoft Copilot Studio as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have any final sort of takeaways for the audience, or
no, I think it's been a good conversation. I really look forward to next week. So yeah, hopefully see a lot of familiar faces there. So yeah, thanks for hosting me today, and I'll see you next week.
Absolutely. So next week is the Cavell Summit EU. There are some tickets still available, though it is mostly sold out. But if you are of the interest to come, you should reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we'll see if we can get you a ticket, or if someone says they're not going to come, we can try and sneak you in last minute on the doors. But it is currently sold out with, I think, 420 people to attend to the biggest Cavell event yet. And of course, we will be focusing on communications and customer experience and all the other topics from the perspective of the industry, which is going to be really good, and some fantastic speakers, including, of course, Ollie himself, who is going to be joining, I think, doing a talk as well, I think, or... Yeah, I think I've seen you on the agenda. I should know. I wrote it. It's that moment of confusion when I'm saying something I'm 100% certain about, but also getting confused. But we won't focus on that. Thank you all for listening. And of course, do like, subscribe, tell your friends. And if you have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, as always, reach out to me or Patrick on LinkedIn, or via email if you've got our emails, and let us know what you think. And if you ever want to come on the podcast, you can also let us know, and maybe we can make that happen. So speak to you all soon.